Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that standing orders numbers 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, 5, 43, and 44 be suspended for the remainder of today's sitting.
The question is that those aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are so suspended.
Pedro. Where is that one in here? But I just seen cuffs in here. I just seen cuffs. Where's Chancery?
Government business is now the order of the day.
Order number 4, sir. In the name of the Honorable Minister of Housing, Lands and Rural Development, to move the passing of a resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Chapter 225, the vesting in the National Housing Corporation of a parcel of land, the property of the Crown, situate at Chancery Lane in the parish of Christchurch in this island, for the public purpose of housing development.
Honourable member for St. Andrew.
Mr. Speaker, we have a situation in Lancaster as a good example, where land was a similar vesting, Mr. Speaker, where land was acquired for housing purposes. The land was then vested in the National Housing Corporation, and for some strange reason, the land was then utilized for commercial purposes. So land which was acquired for poor people, where there were limitations with respect to the price. I think at the time, the market price was supposed to be about $5 a square foot, ended up in the hands of business persons, and the value of that land at that time when the land was purchased was $35 a square foot. I would like to say that the situation has even got a little worse, in that a recent arrangement has been made with another business vendor, to purchase that land at $90 per square foot. Now, I say this because I would hope that we could go back to the existing policy, where when land has been acquired for one purpose, it is utilized for that purpose, and it would not be necessary to change the legislation. Although, because of what transpired under the last administration, it may very well be that out of an abundance of caution, we might have to ensure that when land is acquired by the Crown for one purpose, it cannot be utilized for another purpose. And this land will not undergo that type of exploitation which has happened at Lancaster. I would also like to mention too that this land comes within the perimeters of the plans of the National Housing Corporation, in that we were looking at lands at various places throughout the length and breadth of Barbados for similar development for sites and services. It is hoped that we would be able to have this subdivision approximately, from what I see here, it could accommodate about 200 lots, and it would be able to ease the present housing situation in Barbados. I do not see any proposals on this particular development for housing estates, but at the moment, there's a very serious problem with respect to satisfying the needs of individuals who would like housing in housing estates. That aspect of the housing market has been depleted somewhat because of the 20-year program which the past government entered into. While there was nothing wrong with the sale of the units to the tenants who had been occupying or who had been renting these units for more than 20 years, I think that they did not actually put the type of conditions or the strictures to avoid persons from exploiting the situation by leaving the units unoccupied, paying for the units, leaving the units unoccupied, and leaving the island. A number of requests have been made or are being made more on a daily basis. There are about 30,000 applications the National Housing has as I speak, and they're continuing daily. You probably get about 10 a day, and if you multiply that by 365, you know the amount of applications you would get in a year. But unfortunately, because of that 20-year program and the strictures, the fact that there were no restrictions on that program, it means that once you qualify, the unit could remain vacant, even though you have other persons waiting for units. So it is hoped that if, even though the decision has not been made, I don't know if this might be an area. I haven't actually got the opportunity to actually visit the area. But in the event that we embark on a program for housing units, we would ensure that at least we cover those loopholes so that you would not have any problems with respect to the tenants in the future being allocated or rather taking advantage of any decision by government to allow them to own the property for rents paid, and they don't actually live in the house. Mr. Speaker, I think that I've covered most of what I wanted to say in this debate, and with those few remarks, I ask that this resolution do not pass.
Member for St. George North.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to give support to this vesting resolution in the National Housing Corporation. The National Housing Corporation is an entity that has provided substantial support over many years for the people of Barbados, especially the lower income earners. Over the years, a number of programs have been initiated to give poor people the opportunity not only to own homes, but also to rent homes for the satisfaction of that particular interest group. And of course, it was established at a time when the need for housing was indeed very elastic. Over the years, a number of persons, as I said before, have got that opportunity to own homes. And a number of programs over the years have been established to empower people to own a piece of the rock, as is stated over time. Owning a piece of rock is important for our culture. And we know, Mr. Speaker, that over the years, if there was only one investment an individual had was in a home. And Barbadians' ownership is on the increase. We have seen a situation where home ownership in Barbados has risen, especially in the period between 1994 and 2008, to more than 100%, so that home ownership is on the increase. Over the past decade, before May 24th, we have seen a decline in ownership of homes. And even though mortgage rates have increased, we notice that the private sector have been able to satisfy some of this demand. There are a number of persons in the private sector, Mr. Speaker, who are now into construction. There are a number of private developers who are doing a service for the Crown. But the National Housing Corporation must see its role as providing for the lowest or the lower income groups. And the minister has made the point that when a development is earmarked for a particular interest group, the lower sector of our community, then it must remain. I would like to see a return to that philosophy, that the persons at the lowest end should continue to get some form of relief, because it is that at that level that a number of persons cannot, Mr. Speaker, a number of persons cannot do things themselves. The number of persons, young people especially, who for some reason got a job and they need a home, but it is difficult even to obtain a home in the private sector. And therefore, the National Housing Corporation must return vigorously to satisfy that particular sector. There are a number of persons who turn up at the National Housing Corporation on a daily basis, but cannot find solutions. I remember 2 years ago, while in opposition, I told my constituents from this parliament not to go down to National Housing. I told them at the time, Mr. Speaker, National Housing was a waste of time, that they should not go. And the reason why I said that then was because people go there on a Tuesday, every Tuesday. You leave work to go to National Housing every Thursday, because that's where most people go to get some form of relief. But having gone there continuously every week, they found no solution. And it was a burden on me, because people will come to me on my clinics. I go on to National Housing day after day. I leave my work and without solution. And I believe then, I noticed that there have been changes, and the minister have made the point that we must return to satisfy that particular interest group. We must be able to provide opportunities for them. And how do we do it? I would like to see, Mr. Speaker, that the National Housing Corporation not only re-establish that unit for consumer. I would like to see National Housing re-establish that unit where they look after the consumer, where they look after that class. And how do they do it? They must put somebody who understands why people come to the National Housing Corporation in the first place. They must put somebody there who understands and emphasizes in the plight of the poor. And we need to take a pause at this juncture. And the reason why I intervene here is because members of Parliament must see and must observe what is happening in our community. They must also, Mr. Speaker, look at the historical perspective of why we are here. And I must say that I came to Parliament in order to stop poor people from being poor, to help poor people from being poor, to intervene on their behalf. That's why we are here. Out of the struggle, the way black people became the government in 1951, the struggles of the 1937 riots, we must remember that. And because of those struggles, Mr. Speaker, when the Moyne Commission was set up, it was established primarily to see, to observe, to examine why people struggled in those early years. And housing and employment creation was paramount. Out of the Moyne Commission, Mr. Speaker, the report highlighted housing, derelict housing, persons living on dirt floor, no roofs, no water toilet facilities. People lived in horror. I am saying that after almost 80 years, there are still people who still live in horror. There are people who still live as though there is no tomorrow. There are people who still cannot find decent homes in our society. And I want to also address those things because we started a program while in government. The Labour Party has always been the champion of the poor. We have always been. And if you look at the history of this great party, and that's one of the reasons why I joined this political party. Because out of the 1937 riots, the National Housing Corporation was formed, Housing Authority, to provide relief for the poor. And that's where it started. A lot of housing schemes were started. We had the various units being set up in the Pine, Grisette, St. John, St. Michael, all across Barbados, the early forefathers, the early government of the Labour Party did. And throughout the years, the Labour Party and the government, most governments of the day, established the housing schemes for the poor. And we have them in our midst. Ferniehurst, the Pine, the Farm, and all across Barbados. In our time, we established recently the London Bournes, the Flat Rock, the ones in St. James, Haynesville, and I established those for the poor. Over time, it was agreed that persons who were living in those units for 20 years or more, that they should get the conveyance for those property. And to my mind, that was not a bad decision. The decision was to provide those tenants with the conveyance so that they can own those homes. But over the last decade, even though we had agreed to that, some degree of enfranchisement, some degree of empowerment for those people, a number of persons have not received the conveyance to those homes. And I think that we need to get back to that program. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, we have seen a situation that a number of persons within Barbados who want to own something cannot because there's not enough land. Land was provided by the National Housing Corporation under Sites and Service programs. That in itself was a good program. Many people were able, middle class people were able to find some form of housing as well as the poor. Over time, these programs have helped. But within the last decade or so, many persons were unable to do so. And we have that situation today
where the backlog has continued to escalate, that we need to pay closer attention to that group, the income group, and to that group that really is in need of finding some form of housing. After so many years, there are still persons with pit toilets that really we need to empower those people. We need to eradicate the pit toilet. And our manifesto of 2018, our manifesto this year spoke to the fact that we want to put a dent and eradicate this group once and for all. And I want to congratulate the government's program. I want to say it is a program in which we can identify with, but we need to see some work being done. It is 5 months, still early, but I would like to see a program. Even though we are in structural adjustment on the IMF program, I believe that something has to be done to help those persons who cannot now obtain bathroom facilities, cannot get loans in the bank to improve themselves. The number of persons cannot go to the bank because obviously they're not, some of them are not working. And of course, you know, the banking institution today only take persons who have some form of security of tenure as far as work is concerned. But there are still a number of persons, Mr. Speaker, in my constituency, and I believe across Barbados and yours too, Mr. Speaker, where they would want to upgrade their homes. Too many of our people still live on the edge. And I would want to see the government set up that unit as quickly as possible under the Ministry of Housing and Lands and Rural Development, where a unit not necessarily run by civil servants, and a unit not necessarily run by persons who cannot empathize with the poor, but run by, in that ministry, to look after, to make sure that they go in the field, Mr. Speaker, to see where these housing units, where these poor houses exist, and let us eradicate them once and for all. And the reason why I say so, because too many of our established units, established departments, they go into the field, and I don't want to single out any particular department of government, but there are people who cannot get service. And you can only get service if somebody say, get a letter from a politician. You can only get service if you know somebody. We have to eradicate this thinking. If a man does not have toilet, give him one. He has to be provided with one. We need, Mr. Speaker, a unit, not necessarily, and I believe it should be run by this Parliament. I believe take it out of the realm of politics. Take it out of the realm of politics. There's no person in Barbados who want a toilet facility should have to undergo this form of treatment. And there must be officers coming around to examine to see where these people live. I have a few, I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, because I have been doing my check. We have a few in Rhodes Village, St. George. We have a few in Appawix. We have a few in Constant. We have a few in Glebe. We have a few in Lower State. We have a few in Newbury. We have a few across St. George. I believe in every constituency we have persons who cannot get, who still have pit toilets. And not only this person cannot repair their homes either. There are lots of people cannot go to the bank to get a loan because they are not working, or they may only be working for 2 or 3 days a week. That unit must be set up and established right quickly. And I would like to see it established in a way that persons don't have to come to their member parliament. You have a need, make sure that need is fulfilled by the government. And I want it to be done within the first 3 years of this administration. That's one. Across Barbados, across St. Michael, I made the point during the last election that we need to treat St. Michael as a special case. When I was Minister of Housing, I fought for the IIDB program, the Housing Neighborhood Upgrade Program, that brought in millions of dollars here, and the last government sent back the money. The last government sent back that money into the coffers of the IIDB. And what happened? We didn't upgrade green fields, we didn't upgrade Castle, we didn't upgrade none of the one in St. Thomas's Island View. Nothing happened. I know it's going to be more difficult for us to obtain funds, but Mr. Speaker, I want to see that's a program revised, homegrown program. We got to find the money. We have to make the sacrifice for that category of people. And what about the house fires? In recent times, we have had a lot of house fires. What has been called? What is the cause? Again, I spoke recently on the need for the Tongtana Department and the Ministry of Housing and all the various social ministries like welfare and National Assistance Board to get together to see the cause. What are the causes of these house fires? Is it because the electricity need to be upgraded? Is it because people are careless? What are the causes of these house fires within recent times? But again, Mr. Speaker, the National Housing Corporation, when these people go to the National Housing Corporation, they expect to find a house. Sometimes it is difficult. It is very difficult, Mr. Speaker, for persons to obtain a housing unit. No. If there's a fire, it's going to be difficult. And not because they don't have any units. They don't have any units. But it's a difficult task for the minister at this time. But I know there used to be a fund within the Ministry of Housing and Lands, Mr. Speaker.
We have those locations earmarked, Mr. Speaker, when that time comes around. Because I believe that if we're talking about housing in the 21st century and we're talking about housing solutions in general, then those persons in the rural constituency, not only mine in St. John, should benefit from such an initiative. Now, the Honourable Member for St. Andrew mentioned, which is a fact, that we have a waiting list right now, obviously in excess of 30,000 people waiting, lining up for housing solutions. And in our manifesto, it is documented that we have 15,000 unoccupied properties in this country that we should be able to retrofit and to press into action as it relates to housing solutions. We have a further 20,000 houses that are vacant that we too should be able to trigger some kind of development to lower that 30,000, because if you add the two of those together, that's 35,000 housing solutions that should be readily available to persons within Barbados. The reality is, like I would have mentioned on Tuesday, the fact is that the ministry...
And indeed I know that there have been requests prior to my time for housing solutions in this country. And we ought to recognize that as a result of the backlog and as a result of the need for housing and the whole bankruptcy nature of the National Housing Corporation, we have to look to housing solutions not by government being the provider of housing solutions, but by government being the enabler and putting the policy framework in place, such as passing legislation vesting of lands, whether it's at Chancery Lane, is in St. James Central, it is in St. Philip West, it is in St. Peter, St. Michael South, St. Lucie. That's our role, to ensure that we do what is right as it relates to setting policy, that we can indeed enter into private-public partnerships to ensure that we follow the trend of the Freehold Tenancy Process Act to provide housing solutions so that people in this country can own a piece of the rock. And that's our focus as a government. That's our focus as a government. And we will not lose focus. We recognize, though, that the last administration, and I don't want to spend 3 minutes speaking on this, but we have to remind the people of this country what transpired over the last 10 years. And we can speak to the housing project in St. Michael, South Central it is, Valerie, South Central, and the Grotto. South, sorry. Grotto is South and Valerie is South Central. We can speak to those two housing projects under the last administration. And I'm doing it just to remind people, because we come here, or they came here, not us. Not us. This is a credible group of people in this house, including the member for St. Michael West. I say he's credible. Leave him alone. He's credible. But we come here as credible members of this House Assembly. And we make sure whatever we do in here will not disadvantage no class in this country. Because the last administration, in their quest to provide housing, and indeed they pride themselves on providing the most housing in this country, but there were not real housing solutions. There were houses built that stayed unoccupied for close to 5 years and even longer. And even longer. Colors change. Grass growing through if you go to that place in St. Philip North, just below the District C police station, the river, that's not river, that's parish land. And the honorable member for Christchurch West, I was on the tour with him. I was on the tour with the member for Christchurch West when he went and he put the pictures on Facebook. Now they have to retrofit. Let's look at Constant in St. George. These are some of the housing solutions they claim that they're provided for the people, that they can live in them. And I cry shame on the last administration. I will mention one other thing that they did. One other thing that the last administration did that I know very well the people of this country are still disturbed about. And I won't say it, but I heard some people saying that some should have gone to Dodds. But I won't get into that. I won't get into that. But at the end of the day, and I heard some members stopping, but I ain't going to get into that. When you enter into private-public partnership, or you claim that is not a real public-private partnership, to build the Valerie and the Grotto, at a sum of some $18 million, and at the end of it, the cost of that project was some $27-28 million. Somebody claimed that the project had in too much steel, that's why it moved from 18 up to 28. Too much steel in there. I don't know. But worse yet, Mr. Speaker, the former member for St. Lucie, when he had to seek to clean up the mess, he made a mess of the mess. Because in this chamber and in the media, he said that those houses will be sold to people for over $350,000. Now, which poor person in this country, which school meal server, which artisan, which janitor, which police constable, which security officer, which security guard Which worker on the road can afford to purchase a house for $350,000? You tell me. And those were housing solutions offered by the last government. And remember, and thank to the goodly doctor for St. Philip North who took this country out of their misery. Thank you, Doctor. Current member for St. Philip North. He was the one who presided over those housing solutions. He pat his chest and pushed up his chest. And the 2013 manifesto of that last administration was all about housing solutions. But yet, the most requests we have are for houses and a huge backlog. But I want to say to the people as I move forward, this administration is focused. We recognize that we cannot do it as a government alone. We don't have the resources to do it. But we have people who will partner with this government to ensure that we provide good housing solutions for the poor people and also for the middle class people in this country. And while we are providing these housing solutions, it will be an integrated approach to providing housing solutions. Because we will make sure that the quality of the houses, not like what we see up in Draxall Greens, whereby the guys will say, they will use the term, the houses are bleeding. They has challenges with the houses because they were using what I call an inefficient and ineffective building method to provide housing, but still selling these houses at an astronomical price to working class people in this country. But we will make sure we use an integrated approach whereby we will address drainage, we will address sewage, and we will make sure that quality assurance is part of this integrated approach through a private partnership or public-private partnership as we seek to provide good housing solutions for the people of this country. But I wish, Mr. Speaker, in my wrapping up, to turn to the constituency that I represent, the good people of St. George South. And I will be forever thanking them for giving me this opportunity, this golden opportunity, to represent them at the highest level in this chamber with credibility and integrity. And I wish to turn to, thank you, member for St. Michael South, the star boy, and member for St. John, for St. Philip West, thank you. Housing solutions in St. George. In 2013, and first let me thank the member for St. Andrew and the member for St. John, because on election and when we assume office, I drew these issues to the members who are working on them. But I want the people of St. George to know that the issues with the land in Todd's, that the Democratic Labour Party passed around a paper and asked you to write your name down, and then they give the land to their friends who are not from St. George South. I want you to know that it is not a done deal. And I want you to know that the member for St. Andrew and the member for St. John.
Honorable member. The honorable member.
The honorable members, sorry, they know that they are honorable and I hold them in high esteem. Just a little slip. These honorable members will make sure that the people of Todd's and surrounding districts have the opportunities that they were supposed to have back in 2008 and 2013 under the last administration. Because many of the persons who placed their name down and who went into housing from those areas and who definitely need houses, we have 13 people living in a chattel house, 3 bedrooms. We have to address these issues. We have to address these issues, and the member for St. Andrew has promised me that he is looking into it. And every day I speak to him. They call him my father, the honorable member, but I don't mind that. He's a good man. And he spends time looking at these issues to see how well he can address the housing dearth as it relates to the people in Toz and the surrounding district. And I move now to Brighton. Under the last administration, Brighton and St. George as well. A similar thing. A number of persons from the surrounding districts of Waverley Court, Ellerton, Brighton, Draxall, Melverton, Bide Mill, Windsor, Campaign Castle placed their name down for these housing spots. Poor people because there are low-income housing solutions, whether it's land or it is housing. And up to today, many of these persons have not heard anything from housing. I have drawn this to the attention of the member for St. Peter, for St. Andrew, again, the honorable member, and he too is looking into it, because justice must be served. You can't just bring anybody willy-nilly, your friends, who some of them are not classified as low-income earning families, but yet some of them had houses in other areas of Barbados, but yet you are giving them land. You are giving them land and depriving poor people in this country, the working class people, from owning a piece of the rock. That is the type of housing solutions that this government will preside over. We will ensure that justice is served and that equality is the order of the day as we build out the housing solutions in this country. And Mr. Speaker, my last parochial or local issue relates to the Ellerton housing area, whereby we still have houses in Ellerton housing area with asbestos roofing. I too have discussed this with the member for St. Andrew and also the honorable member for St. John, both honorable members. And I have prepared my list. I have done my walkthrough, and we have prepared our list, and we have passed that list on to the minister. We have a number of persons without their title deeds, and I can speak on behalf of the member for St. Michael Southeast, who's not here with us. But I heard the member for St. Michael Southeast when we were on the other side, and I sat where the member for St. Michael Northwest is sitting now, and she sat where the member for St. Philip North briefly, then she moved to the front bench. She spoke on every housing debate in this Lord Chamber with respect to title deeds for her people. And indeed, that is the same thing for me in St. George South. But we know this administration will address the backlog of deficiencies and inefficiencies from the last administration. But I want us as a people, as I close, to recognize if there's one message that you must take today, is that this government, in its efforts to restructure this country, recognize that we can no longer provide housing for the people. We must set the policy framework. We have become the enabler of housing solutions and not the provider of housing solutions. We will enter into partnerships, private-public partnerships, to ensure the people of this country that we indeed will cater to the working class people, the low-income earners, the middle-class people. And indeed, this resolution is just one of the few resolutions that will come to this honorable chamber to ensure that we have adequate and the right land. Because what we recognize under the last administration, and I know that the physical development plan will address this, and I've seen it in that area coming from St. David's and Cox Road, Fair Pilgrim, Edie Village, where good fertile land for agriculture was changed by the former Prime Minister, the former fundamental, the former Prime Minister of this country, who changed the land use from agricultural land to commercial use. But I know this government, we just debated the green paper for the physical development plan, and I know we will not preside over anything like that, because the member for St. Philip South has prepared for our cabinet a plan as it relates to land for agriculture. And we will make sure that agricultural land, good agricultural land, stay in agriculture. So I'm hoping, as I close, I know that this government will indeed enter into its private-public partnership with investors who are waiting, who are sitting and waiting, because I met with a few when we were in opposition, who spoke to the need to want to assist this government, where the last government who turned their back on them, and they're now back to the tables and meeting with the Minister of Housing, the member for St. Peter, and also the member for St. John to ensure, the member for St. Andrew and the member for St. John to ensure that indeed these private-public partnerships will work and provide affordable housing for our people, whether low-income or middle-income earners. And with those words, Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
The honourable member for St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm deeply obliged for the opportunity to engage the House for what I hope will only be 5 or 6 minutes. And let me say at the outset that I am equally obliged to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition for so facilitating me, because I know that he had intended to speak at this position. Mr. Speaker, sir, my intervention really is to try to offer a perspective. We are a government that is only in office now for 5 months. I think yesterday would have been the 5th month of the first swearing in, or after the first swearing in. And it is important to reflect on that which the last speaker has said, because, sir, as he pointed us to several areas in Barbados which were affected by the housing policy, the ill-advised housing policies of the last administration, ill-conceived and perhaps also ill-advised. They left a significant amount of infuriated people behind, a large amount of disillusioned Barbadian citizens, and, Mr. Speaker, sir, a general degree of dissatisfaction with the way in which the Ministry of Housing, and more particularly so the National Housing Corporation, discharged its duties to the people of Barbados. Now, I do not say this, sir, out of a spirit of acrimony or out of any sense of antagonism. There are some realities in my constituency, for example, and I have heard honourable members speaking previously in this debate make connection with those realities in my constituency, so I presume that it is fair to say that these things are island-wide. If you go into the Bagatelle area in Redmond Village, St. Thomas, Mr. Speaker, sir, that is a small housing development, but the issue of asbestos on roofs is still alive and well in 2018 October, and it is a matter, sir, that must be wrestled to the ground. The issue of overcrowding in units is still alive and well in October of 2018, Mr. Speaker, sir, and it is a matter that has to be brought to a halt. We have to face the reality that there are people who, because they cannot do better, and because the last administration did not wish for them to do better, were forced to be in a situation where they built on extensions onto existing national housing units. Some of those extensions are built on out of plywood, Mr. Speaker, sir, but have no bathroom facilities in them. This is what Barbadian people have been forced to come to deal with. As I said, Mr. Speaker, sir, I do not have in my constituency one of the sprawling and large, those vast acreages of such units as perhaps may exist in Silver Hill or Gull Hill. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, what I see of it in microcosm in my constituency causes deep personal pain. I say as well, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the question of electrical repairs to units. Now, in my constituency, I had to raise this as a matter not only with the National Housing Corporation, on the floor of this House repeatedly, and even as I was doing that, because of the fact that we had then, and frankly, Mr. Speaker, I must say still have now, and it is only 5 months into a government, so I'm not lambasting or beating up on anybody in this administration because it is too early. But the fact of the matter is, it is a chronic problem that must be addressed, where you have panels that are not protected, electrical panels, and you have instances where there are power failures and so on when the rain falls because of the fact that there's a little sparking that takes place. And you have, Mr. Speaker, sir, a stone's throw away literally across the road in Haynesville, 4 or 5 units that would have burnt down because of electrical problems about which the National Housing Corporation was previously notified and about which the National Housing Corporation had done nothing, Mr. Speaker, sir. And in circumstances in which there was no insurance for the property holders. Now, these kinds of things, Mr. Speaker, sir, are circumstances which cry out for redress, because this is treating our own Barbadian people badly. And the government has to do better than that. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, I am of the view that to mitigate those situations and also to mitigate against the consequences of some others that I see in Redmond Village, for example, where we have multiple units leading to a single facility. For example, 7 or 8 units having to use one well or one drainage system. And the reality is that when the well is backed up, you have a problem in several people's backyards. We, sir, have to do better. And I do not accept that we cannot do better. I believe, Mr. Speaker, sir, that it is not for us as a new government to enter into the lamentations and the criticisms that we could only deal with when we were in opposition, but it is for us as a new government to speak sensibly to potential solutions. One view that I have, and I will share now because the Honourable Minister of Housing is present with us and listening, is that I believe, sir, that, and he knows this piece of legislation well, Cap 224A of Barbados, the laws of Barbados, is the Condominium Act. I do not believe that the Condominium Act is a perfect solution to the challenges we have in the housing units across Barbados. But there is a glimmer, there's a kernel of the solution to be found in the Condominium Act's requirement that every unit holder in a condominium, because remember, condominium is really just a set of buildings under one common roof, or a set of units under a common roof, which is essentially what happens with the housing units. But what the Condominium Act requires is the recognition that every proprietor of a unit, every occupant of a unit, has a voice, or should be given a voice, and should be given the benefit of interfacing with the cooperative, and that the cooperative, that group of persons living under a common roof, should be encouraged to come together and to speak with each other about matters of common concern. And I would want to suggest, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the National Housing Corporation should engage with occupants of housing units across Barbados systematically, with a view to having them speak as a collective for every such unit, group of units, so that we can deal, Mr. Speaker, or identify the issues where they exist. As I said, the issues of overcrowding, if it is the issues of electrical problems, if it impacts on 1 or 2 units, chances are, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is a matter that will impact on all the others, especially in the absence of the firewalls. Mr. Speaker, if there's asbestos in roofs, it is a matter that impacts on everybody else. The bad drainage systems, that is a matter that impacts on the collective as well. And therefore, I believe, as just to throw out a perspective on the matter, that there must now be conscious and serious efforts at engaging in the collective. I am not asking engaging with the collective. I'm not asking, sir, for poor people to be saddled with the duty to recover money spent on repairs. That is part of what the Condominium Act proper thinks about and contemplates. But I am suggesting, sir, that the engagement and the benefits, the fruits of that engagement would be useful for the National Housing Corporation. The second point that I wish to make, sir, and the final point is this. Between 2013 and 2018, detailed work was done by a Public Accounts Committee on matters relating to the Grotto, relating to Valerie, relating to Lancaster, which is on the board of my constituency, and that of the Honourable Member for St. Andrew, and that of the Member for St. James North, and also Coverley, and some other areas as well. Mr. Speaker, sir, the fact of the matter remains that not only was detailed work done, but the Public Accounts Committee of the day completed a report. That report, due to the machinations of party politics on the floor of this House, was never allowed to see the light of day by being adopted by the House, because people at that time, Mr. Speaker, sir, felt it was more important to play political games than it was to have light shed on the substance of the issues. I do not believe for 1 second, sir, that the disillusionment that I spoke about at the very start of this debate, of this speech, that the infuriation felt by the people of Barbados who rely on the National Housing Corporation to assist them with housing, but had to see empty units at Coverley for 4 years, Mr. Speaker. I don't believe that the level of dissatisfaction can be taken for granted or just simply left to go away on its own. I believe genuinely that the people of Barbados want to see something come out of the work that was done by the Public Accounts Committee of the day. And I urge my colleague in this House, who is now leader of the opposition, and who, by virtue of his constitutional office, he alone can convene a meeting of a Public Accounts Committee. And according to the new arrangements of the House, I am one of the members of that new Public Accounts Committee. I urge that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition convene such a meeting, sir, and that we go through the process that is necessary to be followed for the adoption of that existing Public Accounts Committee report, so that it can be brought to this House. And having been brought to this House, Mr. Speaker, sir, it can be properly adopted by this House, and the consequences thereafter can flow. Because I do not accept for one moment that the people of Barbados should accept that a piece of land, well, I don't want to get into the specifics of that, but I do not for one moment accept, sir, that some of the atrocities identified in that Public Accounts Committee report should just be allowed to lie fallow and not followed through. I am not, as I said, going to engage in anything that might be deemed politically acrimonious in this speech or antagonistic, so I will not go into specificity. But we all know, because we all followed an election, a general election campaign, that there were some things that came out of that Public Accounts Committee report that were atrocious, that fell well short of what is deemed to be ordinarily acceptable and decent conduct by persons vested with high authority under the Constitution of Barbados. And those things, Mr. Speaker, sir, I urge must see the light of day. And I therefore, from this place, reach out to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition to do that which only he can do under the Constitution of this country. And I say to him that as a member of the Public Accounts Committee, when once he has triggered the process that only he can trigger by virtue of his power under the Constitution and his authority thereto, then after that, Mr. Speaker, sir, I am prepared to stand shoulder to shoulder with him in an effort to accelerate the process of getting that Public Accounts Committee report that was set aside by the last government, callously and indifferently set aside as though it did not exist, brought to the light of day in this House so that necessary steps can be taken thereafter. I am obliged to you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for St. Michael West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would like to take perhaps my cue from the Honourable Member of St. Andrew and Minister of Housing and Lands, and be brief in my submission on this matter today. Mr. Speaker, we join our voices from these hallowed chambers on both sides of the aisle with that of public sentiment in castigating the banks, the commercial banks of this country, for not obviously operating in the interests of Barbadians. The lack of access to banking capital especially for certain categories of persons, classes of investment, apparently. The excessive use of fees and charges that prop up the banking system while they inflict further pain on average Barbadian citizens. We understand the cry of persons who express that view, that the banks seem often not to operate sufficiently so in the interest of Barbadians, even while they pursue their primary purpose for existence, and that is of making a profit. But there's a bank, Mr. Speaker, figuratively speaking. The honourable member from St. George North, while he held the portfolio of Minister of Housing, spoke often of that, the creation, the construction of a land bank in Barbados. And the substantive point I want to make, Mr. Speaker, is that that bank, that land bank, often also does not seem to obviously operate in the interests of Barbadians. And I am of the humble view that the vault, the doors to the vault of that bank need to be open, that greater access may be provided to Barbadians, that they may acquire land spots in Barbados owned now by government, that they may be facilitated in their dream of becoming property owners. I do not know, and perhaps in his wrap-up the Honourable Minister could suggest to us how many lots have been transferred in recent years from the bank to the ownership hands of average Barbadian citizens. I believe that the idea of building up a bank of land, a land bank, is a laudable policy initiative. But if the doors of the vault are not sufficiently open, then access is denied to Barbadians of that which is something to which they primarily aspire in life. That is to own, as we say, a piece of the rock. Second point I would like to make, Mr. Speaker, is that there's a specific reform which is absolutely critical, necessary in Barbados at this time. And this government avows that it is much about the business of transforming Barbados and instituting or implementing reforms in various critical areas of national life. And right now I know there is a process of restructuring ongoing with reference to state-owned enterprises, state-owned agencies, albeit that that process is still not clear. The understanding of Barbadians, it is ongoing. But that is a restructure born out of expediency and necessity because of the need to respond to IMF-related criteria and the need to right the ship of the economy. And though those restructures are a reality, I believe that there is a sense in which we need to reform state agencies such that they serve in far better fashion the original intended purpose. Decentralization was intended when introduced to achieve certain levels of efficiency, to provide better quality of service for Barbadians by devolving institutions away from central government. That still remains, in my view, a laudable idea and one which ought to be pursued. But you and I know, Mr. Speaker, that over time, the culture has set in and has persistently obtained that these agencies are used in such fashion as that significant assets belonging or held in the name of the people of Barbados are removed from the immediate oversight of central government and then are allocated or assigned to these state agencies for the purpose of shifting them away from the immediate oversight of central government and the controls that come therewith, and from the immediate scrutiny of the public. And so now we're faced with a situation of a good idea going bad for many years, where assets are allocated to the management of state agencies, and then central government, the parliament, the public of Barbados are not in a position to render the necessary scrutiny over the management and use of those resources. Indeed, when the Minister of Housing spoke, the Honourable Minister of Housing spoke this morning, he alluded to a certain situation in which land was vested in the NHC and set aside for a specific purpose, and that it was later on used to the advantage of some entity for which it was not intended or approved. And I don't quite recall the specifics of the case, but certainly such instances are numerous where we have been forced to lament that this was allocated to a state agency, and today we're talking about the the NHC National Housing Corporation, and the fact that land, when they're allocated for certain specific purposes, may be used for other purposes other than those approved. And I'm simply saying that there's an imperative attaching to the reform process that must set in place systems and revise procedures and principles, regulations that will curtail that undesirable behavior, where when Parliament has acted in the best interest of the people of Barbados and assets devolved from the center, decentralized to the management of external but government state-related agencies, that these assets are not misappropriated or their use misapplied. I think that that is a serious issue. I think that the honourable member for St. Andrew is a man possessed of such measure of integrity as that he would understand that, and that he would want under his watchful eye to ensure that that is not going to be the case. In that regard, we have to ask the pertinent question as to whether or not what level of commitment the minister can give us with respect to the updating of reports from the National Housing Corporation. Unless I'm mistaken, I think the last report coming from the National Housing Corporation dates back several years, maybe to 2009. And that is not the way that we want to operate in 2018, because it's the people's resources that we're talking about. This government has put on record its intention to ensure that there are higher levels of accountability practice, and we would want to ask of the minister to make some kind of a commitment as to when we're likely to see the next report from the National Housing Corporation. The price of land, Mr. Speaker, in Barbados is high, and therefore, because of the high cost attaching to land, it is prohibitive to some specific groups of people. And very importantly, we must always ensure that their interests are served as intended by any legislation we pass in this honorable chamber, or by any measure such as this one before us today, that we seek to serve their interests. And so the high prohibitive price of land must be looked at in relation to several entities and specific groups. Investors, I believe that one of the things which stymies investment in Barbados is the cost of land necessary for the establishment of such investment. And so investors have to balk at the prohibitive and unappealing prices. So that is not only foreign investors, it's domestic investors as well. We educate people in Barbados, Mr. Speaker, in very difficult times. The government has not only committed itself to, but as I understand it, has already executed the necessary to ensure that Barbadian students are not deprived of the opportunity of a tertiary level education in Barbados because there's a cost attaching to it. The debate goes on with reference to that. I stand with the government on that one, and I'd like to say that for sure. But we educate people up to tertiary level who then aspire to make something of their lives, to build families, to own property. Having educated them, we then facilitate a culture and an environment, or we do not do enough to ensure that there is not the creation of a culture and environment in which land prices are so high such that those educated aspirants to home and property ownership in Barbados are left outside of the pale. Single income homes in Barbados find it extremely challenging to own properties. As a person practicing in the legal field, I am sure that you're very well aware of that. And single income often does not cut it in terms of the necessary qualifications to come into home and property ownership in Barbados, single income households. And then there are young couples seeking to establish family situations in the traditional way, and even some in the not so traditional way. And they too are denied the opportunity of owning properties because of the high cost of land attaching to such. And therefore, the whole business of land pricing, in my view, has to have a relook. And if we are to transform Barbados, I always say, we have to look at structures of ownership in Barbados, and as a government facilitate the necessary shifts such that the undesirable features of ownership structures in Barbados are changed to the advantage of the majority. The high price of land also impacts upon business entities in our economy being able to compete with business entities from other regional economies who export into Barbados, therefore from whom we import, and whose prices correspondingly then can be low when compared to prices available in Barbados. And so regional products come into Barbados. We get flustered, we grumble, we groan, we lament, and we say that Barbados is now owned by this place and that place, and that every commodity to be found in that place is now to be found here, and the prices are lower than those which are obtained locally. And part of the reason for that is because of the cost of land component inherent in the structure of the domestic prices, or the prices of the domestic products. We therefore have to look at land prices in relation to that. Mr. Speaker, we must find ways of building at lower costs. We persist in rationalizing the high cost of low-cost housing. And we rationalize that on the basis that there must be some measure of cost recovery and that revenue must be generated from this project in order to facilitate the next project. And while we rationalize thus, those who are intended to be best served by what we call low-cost housing, their interests become secondary to the first consideration, that is, of revenue generation. And high costs in the interest of revenue generation does not cut it, because it does not meet the intended purpose and the philosophical goal to which we are committed. That is, as governments in the modern day Barbados seeking to provide land and house and property ownership for Barbadians, including those who need to have low-cost housing. We must remove, Mr. Speaker, in this regard as well, the appearance of favored and preferential treatment for some at the expense of others. I think the minister as well alluded to that. And that is more than appearance, Mr. Speaker. We know, you know, as well as I do, that that is part of the reality out there. And that Barbadians really do believe there are those who are favored. So you may go to NHC 20 times in your lifetime, and you lament, as the Honourable Member for St. George South said was his experience even while minister, that there's no help to be found for you. But one call from a favoured voice is given preferential treatment, and all kinds of things miraculously become possible immediately. Land subdivisions, the availability of this spot or that spot, the ignoring of the fact that that is a Zone 1 area. All these things happen miraculously, Mr. Speaker. And that appearance of preference and partiality in the system has to be dealt with, else we go nowhere in pursuit of the goals of transforming Barbadian society. I would wish to speak just briefly with reference to the matter of the housing units at Country Park Towers in St. Michael West, the constituency which I continue to represent. And I join with the Honourable Member in St. James from St. James Central in drawing attention to the fact that we can't abandon people, confine them to inconvenience and stresses, and expose them to dangers in these housing units while we retain some responsibility for the properties and things like proper ventilation, proper access in case of emergencies, things like maintenance. These things are a reality that folks have to deal with from day to day in their private situations. And in 2018, despite the economic stresses we face, despite the constraints on the government purse, we have to find a way to make sure that we provide service to these communities. The agencies, as I said, emerged out of a desire to devolve from the center to create efficiencies and provide better service. And if we are not doing that, then we have to call into question the existence of those agencies. And that is all I would want to say at this stage on this particular and specific matter, Mr. Speaker, and I thank you for your ears.
The Honourable Member for St. Thomas.
Speaker, I am happy to be a part of this institution, and I want to cite a few areas of concern I have. But of course, I have at the outset to really indicate my admiration for what the Barbados Labour Party would have done in its 14 consecutive years of service, acknowledging that before that even occurred, the Barbados Labour Party would have been an integral part of helping with housing solutions at all levels in this good country of ours. And so I support this resolution. I want to say, sir, that as a result of our good track record on housing, that we can cite some of our most recent housing units and developments so that members of the public can remember that Barbados Labour Party has done well in the time that it was offered to it and shall continue to do well despite even the economic circumstances we're under, because we believe in putting people first. And so I want to refer, sir, to a place called Kensington Lodge, and I believe that any society should develop its city. Kensington Lodge, London-born, Country Towers, Barbry's Gardens. A lot of people don't remember Barbry's Gardens, sir, Pondside. And then I go down to the north of the island, Dingstown, Orange Hill Development, and so on. Hundreds of houses were built in that time. Not to mention the rest of the country, because I would want to use this time, sir, as wisely as possible. And what has happened with the last administration should have been better dealt with, because they always boasted of us having a land bank. And I can remember the Honorable for St. Lucie, that we have a land bank, but we are not building houses, and he is going to do this or do that. And yes, there was a land bank. And the Democratic Labour Party used that as their platform for when they came into office, sir. If there was no land available, they would not have been able to hit the ground running with building houses. So I am happy that they undertook that, because their manifesto pledges has said they will build 100 houses in 100 days and matters of that nature, sir. But I want to say, sir, that some of the houses that they built are projects that are still partially abandoned. The BLP ensured in its time that the Housing Credit Fund and the General Workers Fund were put in place to help ordinary Barbadians put a roof over their heads or to improve the quality of the roof of the house. And so thousands of Barbadians, particularly maids, general workers, gas attendants, shop assistants, persons working in households, they were able to improve the quality of their lives. As a matter of fact, sir, you well know how the National Housing Corporation, the rural and urban developments, ensured that Barbadians had the quality of their houses, their housing stocks improved. And there's living testimony across the length and breadth of Barbados, including St. John, that never was ours, but thank God St. John is on board now, including St. Lucie, and those constituencies in St. Philip and Christchurch that were constituencies that were occupied by other members on the other side at that time. But we made no difference with the constituencies, because at the end of the day, we want only one Barbados, and the quality of life for all Barbadians would have been integral in what we were doing. That Workers' Fund, I need for the Honourable Minister to give us any ideas to what is happening, but I heard of the travesty associated with the Housing Credit Fund, and we need to know what is happening, because we are waiting, sir, for opportunities for our people, meaning the people in all the constituencies, and just not St. Thomas or Barbados Labour Party supporters, but all Barbadians be able to enjoy the quality of life that we know they deserve. We're seeing too many people in the newspaper that are homeless, and some of them are homeless because they want to be, but some have nowhere to go. When you go into some houses, the condition is so deplorable that it really is heart-wrenching to know that so many billions of dollars were wasted by the last administration, and they did not treat to the whole matter of housing stock in the way we expected. And sir, a lot of what we see today in the kind of housing stock across the island is as a result of a Barbados Labour Party that had the vision to a Prime Minister who is now deceased for St. Thomas, that worked with his cabinet to bring about into this legislation here today, sir, today meaning in Barbados, that 37 or so years ago, legislation associated with the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act, empowering Barbadians across Barbados in plantation tenantries that they can earn that spot at 10 cents per square foot. And a little later, sir, will tell you how awful it is now, where some of those plantation owners are unreasonable, unscrupulous, unfair, and duping some of our Barbadians. Today, 2018. I speak with a heavy heart every time. And whether people like it or not, I shall speak for the people of St. Thomas who have remained faithful to the Barbados Labour Party over the many decades, because they've had astute leadership at all the levels. And I have inherited from those persons, my successors, who did an excellent job before me. I am now laying the platform for whoever comes after me, continue to offer quality service to the people of the constituency of St. Thomas, and I encourage my colleagues to continue to do that in theirs. The housing neighborhood upgrade program is taking away my heart. When the folk at Allen View, in a community where those folks cannot do any additional building, once they had an existing house, they had to have struck down planning permission, and I agree, you don't want them to breach the law. But many of them have tracts of land that they can do nothing with it today, Mr. Speaker, sir, because of the restriction that was legally put in place, supporting and ensuring that we do not put heavy weight on Harrison's Cave, because you never can tell, and we don't want for there to be any catastrophe at all in any area in Barbados, furthermore in the world. And that $60 million that the Barbados Labour Party, under the former member for the city, the Dames here, created an idea, she herself and the honourable member then for St. James South, another female doing it, to look at the housing neighbourhood upgrade program for Cat's Castle, the garden land, which is a part of your constituency, sir, Greenfields, a part of the city, and Allen View. And to this day, Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg your pardon, it is the honourable member for St. Michael West, our leader of the opposition. Beg your pardon.
That is correct.
But perhaps he might want to, having got no effect from it, sir, having had no impact, no resources, I know that he too feels extremely disturbed about what has happened, particularly in this time, sir, when things are so hard. 47 million Barbados dollars were repatriated to Washington because the then Democratic Labour Party did absolutely nothing but hire consultants. And poor people are still poorer as a result. We have inherited it, but they can rest assured, once this economy improves, their needs will be met, because that is all the Barbados Labour Party has ever done. Look after people and help to empower them and lift them up. That $47 million, sir, could have been spent to improve the quality of life for those people in those 4 communities and make a difference. I cry shame on the past Democratic Labour Party for being so immature, irresponsible, and unreasonable to poor people who were relying on them to be able to change or to help them around the corner. I call it still the last decade, sir, 2008 to 2018. They have nothing to boast of but the families first and the fatted calf syndrome that they develop, looking and peeping under themselves. It must be them and their families and friends who should survive, ordinary people who have made a contribution to this country, old and young, shuttled into a corner. When you push the University of Education, the University of Barbados, or the West Indies, and shunt those corners, those students with the brilliance and the avarice to want to learn in a corner by stopping from paying the tuition fees. What have you done to the fabric of this society, sir? You have destroyed it. Families first. Their families got the scholarships. Their families got opportunities to do and go all over the world. And poor people's children who are bright too were overlooked, and it is wrong. And if this Barbados Labour Party does it, sir, I shall speak out. Because at the end of the day, I know from whence I have come. And I have seen people from the villages that were impoverished rise to the top and carry the country, carry the business, carry our institutions forward. And therefore, I condemn the Democratic Labour Party for taking advantage. It's a kind of slaughtering the people in this society because they were poor and could do no better. A slaughter. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to say that I'm happy to know that there have been developments taking place. Construction used to be firing in our time. It is now down. Our artisans are at home. Some of them have gone overseas. Others are walking from building to building, structure to structure, seeking employment. And therefore, I want to see a time again in Barbados, especially under this Barbados Labour Party, once we turn this hurdle with the IMF, to see men back on the job, women back on the job, because a man who is unemployed has got a family that is unemployed. Or families for that matter, because we know how it is with major men. So they might have families that need to get some food, go to school, and so on. If the men are employed, they are going to get in trouble. Because when a baby is hungry, when a child is hungry, when a woman is pregnant or hungry, he has to find a way to feed her. And women are so dynamic now, Mr. Speaker, sir. They too want to be able to work, that they can match the funds with the husband or the partner's funds to be able to improve the quality of their lives, to live on a better shed. A better house, sir, to elevate themselves from where they are. And so I want, whenever new housing developments are going in place, for recreational spaces to be made available and mandated by the Town and Country Planning Department, so that there will be spaces. And we see what's happening in our housing areas. They are too cramped, there's no space and so on for the young people to play, the old ladies and so on to come out, and the old men to come out and recreate, and it is creating quite some challenges in our society. I believe that the recreational spaces with the old and the young mingling together with the generational linkages, that will give them a chance to be able to pick up some of the culture, some of the mores, some of the discipline, and some of the attitudes and so on in their communication in the area of space for play. I believe that any other housing unit going up, sir, or set of units going up, sir, should follow the standard set at London Bourne with a baby creche in the facility, so that women and men bringing the children in the village have somewhere to put their children. And I believe that should be the way for us to go, Mr. Speaker. I want also, sir, to say that I have had another blow. I speak about it all the time. I will give him his credit, the former member for St. Philip North as Minister of Housing, although he made a boo-boo in a lot of areas. When the formal communication went to him, he proceeded to acquire 47 house spots at 40 acre in St. Thomas. And I am paining because I have to pass there to get to my dwelling. 47 spots, as far as I was told, have been already allocated close to the election that has just gone, and not a boy or girl, woman or man who has applied from St. Thomas, even those living in 40 acre, you have to pass those 47 spots to get down to what is really the tenantry of 40 acre. None of them, sir, has been brought into play. I will make further checks with the Ministry of Housing to be able to see if there's anybody who opted out. Because when I see the S, the P, the J, the E, all kinds of cars going in and demarcating spots, people in St. Thomas are hurting because they feel left out a second time. And I share their pain. Yes, sir. But you know, Mr. Speaker, it really is very interesting what that last government did. I'm going to go though, sir, first to say how I support a mixture of housing whenever spots are acquired and there will be any kind of construction taking place. Bajans still like to get a house spot and build to suit their pockets. Because if they're not getting the General Workers Fund, if some of the banks and the credit unions are not lending them, whenever they catch a meeting turn, they can go and pay to get a carpenter, a mason, depending what level the houses are at. Build from the back and come from the front to the front. My mother built a house from the back to the front with 8 children in it. There were inconveniences, but thank God today there are none. You can walk in freely. You don't have to step over any steel. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to bathe in the backyard and hide. Things have changed. And therefore, people still want some spots to build independently and grapple at their own pace to be able to get it done. But you know what is great about rural Barbados? I can't speak for urban Barbados in the same way. Those artisans that have been turned away from the work from the last administration, who are on the road now looking from spot to spot to spot where development is taking place to get a job, they will engage them in the community and the money will circulate. And you know, at the end of the day, what happens? More often than not, they don't even ask for money. The person who is building the house cook a big pot of food, and everybody who has the skills come in and work. That is how the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Seventh-day Adventists build their churches. Community spirit. And they have some of the most beautiful buildings in the country. And so this is the kind of project when the Honourable Minister gets the opportunity to do some projects to be able to focus on that. I also want to say, sir, that I am one of the persons who really strongly support the pit toilet project that the Barbados Labour Party had spoken about in its manifesto. A lot of our people are still using pit toilets. And they are not new, nor are they close to the house. And I want this day today, sir, to ask those landlords, soften their hearts, and help to give some permission for those persons, not only in rural Barbados, but urban Barbados, that they could at least get the privacy and the dignity of a waterborne toilet on their properties, so that they will be able to enjoy life, a quality life like all of us. A pregnant woman walking through a little track in the night, a little old lady with a walking stick, a little old man who's crippled partially. We need to make sure that they have a comfortable house to live in and a washroom in the house that will ease them. I also want to say, sir, that as we speak today in Barbados, where we talk about democracy, in the parish of St. Thomas, I still have some challenges with this 10 cents per square foot, though, sir. I have received some letters from people who are being asked to pay 10 cents per square foot, $10 per square foot for land that is plantation land that they are living on. And I have filled out the forms and sent them to the Ministry of Housing for them, because they are entitled to the 3,000 square feet or whatever they have at 10 cents per square foot. But my people don't always know. They don't always understand. And we need to break it down to their level, that they know you don't have to give no owner of any plantation no $10 per square foot. You are entitled to 10 cents per square foot. That is the law. And the way that it is being done, it really hurts my heart. I can take you, Mr. Speaker, sir, to Hambon, St. Thomas, going into Vaucluse, and show you a family that had a large tract of land that was taken away from that poor woman. She went to the office the morning and signed away her life. And now she and her children are squatting on a little hill that town planning in our time refused to give permission. But you know what? The ink had already dried on the paper. And when you go there today, Mr. Speaker, a massive road and some bungalows, I can't even call them bungalow, mansions, are going up in that area now on that woman's land. 10 cents per square foot land. She got nothing. I can go back in 40 acre in the tenantry and show you a woman who had 2 other spots that her family had paid up and they qualified for the 10 cents per square foot land. And the owner of the land came and said to her quietly in the office the morning as well. She said, "How much do I owe you for these spots of land?" She was told, "It's going to be so expensive you can't pay me." Ordinary woman in understanding. You know what? She was told, "Give me back those 2 and take that one you have for free." Mr. Speaker, sir, she only had to pay about $500 for each spot. 5,000 square feet, 15,000 square feet. That woman has children and grandchildren and is now applying for one of the housing spots at the new 40 acre that probably will go at $8 or $10 a square foot. I am going to be the mouthpiece for them first, sir. That's why they voted for me in the thousands. Because it is wrong. And we have to stop those unscrupulous plantation owners and property owners from taking advantage of poor people. But some of them talk too late. And when they speak too late. My colleagues here who are attorneys at law said, since I can't do anything for you, already the ink has dried on the contract that these persons have signed. It is wrong. I want justice to prevail in this country, sir. I'm going to come to a close now, sir. I want, if to find out, Mr. Speaker, through you, sir, if the Honourable Minister responsible for housing will be able to give us a status report on the same parish land in St. Philip. I vividly remember in 2009, sir, when the now late Prime Minister for the Democratic Labour Party shut down Barbados the Sunday evening, took the whole of CBC to Merrick's in St. Philip, set up stages, had champagne and lots of food to eat, music, to hand over houses and the first housing project under them to people in the community. They did not even have proper roads put in there. They started to build the project without town planning permission. But that is not the point. The point is, one person was called up and given keys. And when her son was called and said, your mother is now one of the home earners, he said, well, my mother didn't even apply. So I don't know how she got keys. Why must we reduce people in this country when we want to empower them? Invite them to a show and hand them keys that are dangling when most of them perhaps had done the down payment. I wouldn't say all of them didn't. But nobody can do that to me, Mr. Speaker. Don't let anybody do it to you, those who are in earshot of what I'm saying. You pay for it, you don't have to be exposed. I believe, Mr. Speaker, sir, that today, knowing that CBC is owed over $100,000 by the Democratic Labour Party, I wonder if some of it is for that function.
100 million. 100 million.
Yeah, but I'm talking now personal from the Democratic Labour Party end. Is 100 million? I thought it was 110,000.
100,000.
That the Democratic Labour Party as an institution.
You're correct.
Not the government as an institution. They owe to CBC. No wonder why CBC is in the condition it is in, with Chinese every night in my ears. I don't want any Chinese talking in my ears, say that all the time. I love them as human beings. But we want our culture. And we want our children, yes, to know about others. But when the voices are saying one thing, the print underneath is saying something else. So you can tell that that doesn't belong to us. So I want for whoever owes from the Democratic Labour Party $110,000 for approximately, pay it in so CBC can give coverage of what is happening in our culture, within our culture, from all those excellent pageants our children do in school, for what the NCF has been doing over the years and currently so, for what is happening in our villages. I want CBC to be empowered, therefore pay in the $100,000, Mr. General Secretary, formerly of the Democratic Labour Party. I want also, Mr. Speaker, sir, to let the members of the public know, no wonder why Barbados is in this impoverished state. While spending by the Democratic Labour Party, where we know up in the grotto, hundreds of dollars per square foot, to build that property up there, we were in millions of dollars in debt in this whole housing situation that I consider some certain aspects of it a travesty. I want to say, sir, and to ask through you for the member of St. Andrew, sir, the Honourable Minister, to let us know about houses that we learned that members as our senior in the Democratic Labour Party got, or lands that have not been paid for. I understand, sir, that somebody built a 6-apartment house in St. James. I understand another one is happening under the hill by West Terrace or Husbands. Another 6-apartment block. Did not pay a cent for the land. The Honourable Minister has to do his investigations. Let us know. Too many poor people in Barbados. Too many homeless people. Over 500 of them. Relying on Mr. Safri and others to feed them. I want to know, sir. I also learned, sir, that there are 3 of the leading members in the Democratic Labour Party who got spots over in St. James. I'm not going to call the community. The minister would know. And that they got them for free, sir. I am paying a mortgage. Members in here are paying mortgages. Some people will be glad to pay a mortgage but can't get a house because of who they were or where they come from other than them. I want those 3 leading persons whom we have heard, and it is alleged that they got free spots for the Honorable Minister and his team in the ministry through his permanent secretary. Bring the facts and let the people of Barbados know that they have been duped by the Democratic Labour Party and has us in a rut now where this Barbados Labour Party, and less than a month old, had to go to the IMF. But thank God for my leader and the Barbados Labour Party in the cabinet for lending the support to build courage and let Barbadians know we care and we will continue to work with you to give you a better life. I also want, before I close, sir, to say I should have added on that the Democratic Labour Party therefore set the trend of breaking the Treasury and printing money through the central bank to curl people's hair and brought us to this rut. And I have to suffer like them because when my people come in front of me and they are crying, can't send school the children, no food to cook, can't pay the light bill or the water bill, and welfare is up to its neck in giving the resources. I want them to find those men and women who left in here, Mr. Speaker, sir, and let them get something. Or I am recommending it, I'm not saying it's going to happen, if they can get their pension, give it to them because they still have to live here because they got high. They got to live on high. But any money at all, Mr. Speaker, I say so, not my other colleagues. When it comes to the gratuity, hold on to it because we need it to help to carry this country forward with the IMF. Hold on to the gratuity. Give them their pension. I still want them to live there. We're not all bad. And I close, sir, by saying that these decent, hard-working Barbadians and these breadwinners had to go home because of mismanagement. We empathize with them, we sympathize with them because it's not easy to get up this morning and to lose your house that you may have gone and paid for through the private sector. And I pray that sooner rather than later, those groups of individuals, those couple hundred people who have been sent home, because we have to stabilize this country. When the Democratic Labour Party mash up, we now have to see if we can buy back and build courage and make people feel safe in a country that was stable in 2008 when they took it over. I want to finally say, sir, that I ask for God's guidance and intervention in helping us to achieve the goal of giving back Barbadians their dignity, helping them to go to work and work productively and feel safe knowing that they have done the best they could under the circumstances. The final comment, sir, is to do with the Anglican Church and to ask the Honourable Minister and others to negotiate with the Anglican Church. They are the biggest landowners after the plantation owners in this country. They have massive tracts and acres of land, thousands of acres of land dotted across the whole of Barbados. I am an Anglican, so you should know. And therefore, I am asking the Honourable Minister through you, sir, how negotiations can take place in a private public partnership to be able to approach the development of some of the land that the Anglican Church has. I know that the one in St. Thomas that runs to the back of the Freedom Village project and goes all the way up and reaches over to Content, that they had a plan before. But perhaps in these harsh economic times, they cannot generate the kind of investors that will help them with it. I want the government to bring them on board and negotiate with them because people in St. Thomas want housing too. People across Barbados want housing. They believe St. John has got the highest amount and largest amount of Anglican church that has land. What is the point in holding on to it when the money can be invested and it can even improve the quality of the churches? St. John's Church is has one of the most picturesque views in Barbados. The one at St. Margaret's, the one down on thing by Jordan's Prospect, is that what it's called? Some of the most beautiful locations. I believe too that the Minister of Tourism might want to be able to do a project with those churches as well, to be able to get them to be a part of our heritage locations and make a difference. I know St. John's Church is doing well, but we have others that are dotted near the beach side that will be able to benefit by it. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to ask that a lot of that uncultivated land It is lying fallow now for many, many generations that the Honourable Minister, through his astute leadership so far, and of course I can refer to his past performance, will be able to have that kind of communication and dialogue so that the Honourable Minister of Housing and of course the member for St. John would like to get that kind of assistance and guidance as well. But I'd like to ask them through you, sir, to be able to make an effort to help us to be able to build out the housing stock and to build quality houses and not houses that before people can live in them, the termite coming through the ceiling. Because we're seeing a lot of that in some of those building house projects. People are getting just a shell for a house. They have to put in the tiles, put in the cupboards, sometimes put in the partitions, build the steps. I would like for those projects that are going to come on board, sir, to be a turnkey solution. So that when people come, they turn the key, move in your bed, move in your furniture, put in the baby crib, and so on and so forth. But what they're getting now for $200,000 and $300,000 is really not what Barbadians expect. And there's no way that I'm going to buy anybody's house that when it goes to turn the key, I have nowhere to put the groceries because there are no cupboards. I only have the step to come up, but I don't have any railings, any gallery to stop me and my children from falling over the incline. That I don't have a backyard. Nothing is done. Something is wrong. I don't know who our inspectors are from the Ministry of Housing. I don't know who our inspectors are, if it is them from the Town Planning Department, to come back and see if the projects that have been approved have conformed with the standards and the rules and regulations and the laws that the Town Planning Department has.
The honourable member has 2 more minutes.
Yes, please. And so, Mr. Speaker, sir, I gave my full support to this resolution, and I ask, sir, that the honourable member, in his quest to be able to satisfy Barbadians again, will give Barbadians a chance to get that General Workers Fund going, as well as to call on us, and if there are any ideas that we can share beyond in our meetings otherwise, that we will be able to go and have communication with the plantation owners, have communication with the Anglican church owners, or any other institution that has large tracts of land, so that people can be able to get better housing solutions. And I pray, sir, that the Ministry of Housing that has attached to it rural and urban development, rural development, will give us an opportunity across rural Barbados to get better housing stock for our residents who have been reeling for the last 10 years under a Democratic Labour Party that was clueless, that had no interest in human beings except to vote for them, that had no interest in fleecing the people of Barbados through the Treasury. I ask, sir, that we work with those people, all Barbadians, despite whatever constituency, despite whatever political persuasion, whatever class, whatever creed, work with them, because we believe in a better life for our people. Quality life is important if our people are to go forward and enjoy it, and our children in those households are to get good environments where they can learn to sit down, do their homework, that they will be uninterrupted, that they can have a comfortable bed to live in, because we have too much poverty developing in this country that we know we can correct it once we get the funding and once we get a spirit of working and embracing, as we know we should, to be able to change lives around. I wish to thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Notes by Your Honour, Speaker.
I'm in receipt of your message from the Honourable the Senate. Message from the Honourable the Senate to the Honourable the House of Assembly. The Honourable the Senate has the honour to inform the Honourable the House of Assembly that at its sitting on Wednesday, 24th of October, 2018, the Debt Holder Approval of Debt Restructuring Bill 2018, the Road Traffic Act, the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2018, and the National Insurance and Social Security Amendment and Validation Bill 2018 were amended in the terms as cited below. In the Debt Holder Approval of Debt Restructuring Bill 2018, at Clause 4, Subsection 1 and Subsection 2, the words 5th day of October 2018 were deleted. and substituted by the words 29th day of October 2018, therefore. Similarly, in the second schedule at parts 1 and 2 of that schedule, the words Friday, 5 October 2018 were deleted and substituted by the words Monday, 29 October 2018, therefore. In the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2018, Clause 2, subsection B was amended by deleting the word 24 in the second line of that clause and substituting the word 11, therefore, so that Clause 2, subsection B should now read, by deleting the words 11 to 24 in the definition of minibus and substituting the words 11 to 57. Clause 19 in the new section 16, subsection 4, the word of immediately appearing after the word months was deleted and substituted by the word or, therefore. Clause 20 in the new section 16A, subsection 4, the word of appearing immediately after the word months was deleted and substituted by the word or, therefore. In the National Insurance and Social Security Amendment and Validation Bill 2018, the schedule consequential amendments at column 2 with respect to the National Insurance and Social Security Self-Employed Persons Regulation 1970. The words 15.50% were deleted and the words 16.10% were substituted, therefore. 16.10 were substituted, therefore, and the words 16.50% were deleted and the words 17.10% substituted, therefore. The paragraph should now read, in the first schedule, delete the words 16.10% and substitute the words 17.10%. And the Honorable the Senate transmits the amended bills to the Honorable the House of Assembly, inviting concurrence in the amendment to the bills, dated the 24th day of October 2018, signed by the President. I am not in receipt of the minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, 23rd October 2018.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that those minutes be deferred.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes dated held on the 23rd of October 2018 to be deferred. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. The said minutes have been deferred.
You're going to move to post.
Recommittal of government notices.
Recommit, exactly. Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of the following resolutions. Resolution to seek the concurrence of the Honorable House of Assembly in the amendments made by the Honorable the Senate to the debt holder, approval of Debt Restructuring Bill 2018, the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2018, and the National Insurance and Social Security Amendment and Validation Bill 2018. No, because you're giving notice.
Government business recommitted.
So
suspension of. Not suspend.
I will do this now.
Yeah, but he's telling us you are suspend the resolution.
Oh. Okay. Just ask for that. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that further consideration of the Housing Resolution number 4 be now postponed.
Beg to second that.
Question is that the aforementioned resolution be postponed.
Order number 5, sir. In the name of the Honorable Acting Leader of the House, to move the passing of a resolution to seek the concurrence of the Honorable the House of Assembly in the amendments made by the Honorable the Senate to the Debt Holder Approval of Debt Restructuring Bill 2018, the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2018, and the National Insurance and Social Security Amendment and Validation Bill 2018.
Mr. Speaker, in support of the resolution as a whole, but more particularly in relation to the debt holder approval of debt restructuring, in the original bill as was passed by this chamber, in relation to the schedule, Pedro, this is what was supposed to be changed.
In the message. So we got
Yes, Mr. Speaker. When this bill was first debated and passed in this chamber, the timelines contemplated that the Senate, the Honorable the Senate, the other place, would have been able to approve the bill and pass it on the next sitting of the Senate. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, as circumstances turned out, the Senate was adjourned to the 17th of October. The bill made specific mention to a date in several of its sections and in the schedule, and that date was the 5th of October. We found ourselves, therefore, in the situation where the Senate, originally intending to pass this bill, set note compliance of a particular event by a time in the future, would have found itself in the upward position of, on the 17th, dealing with something that could not have therefore happened in the past. And it therefore became necessary to move this slight amendment. The amendment therefore allows the operative date of that section to take place on Monday 29th, on Monday coming, so as to be able to allow for the intention of Parliament to be satisfied in that regard. And I therefore ask the Senate, ask this Honourable Chamber to concur in that necessary amendment from the Senate.
The question is that this Honourable House concur in relation to the aforementioned bill. All those honourable members in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Bills, right, the aforementioned bills. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
That is it.
I don't even speak.
Yeah, he don't need, because we did all. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of this morning's sitting until 2:15 this afternoon.
The session of this Honourable Chamber be suspended until 2:15 in the PM. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This Honourable Chamber is suspended until 2:15 p.m.
There's two speakers and done with it.
supposed to be providing low-cost solutions to Barbadians who deserve it, who are not able to partake of the high-cost solutions that some of us in here might be able to partake of or to be able to afford. The difficulty comes in, Mr. Speaker, because of how it is perceived. Quite often, the units themselves, when they are built, they're not built in such a way as to inspire community living. They're not built in such a way as to inspire pride. So we have perpetuated this cycle of looking upon the NHC units as some form of governmental charity, as opposed to the state providing with an opportunity to get your first chance at housing, to get a start at home. Since being elected on May 24th this year, it seems so long ago, sir, that I get confused with the dates. I say March instead of May. But since being elected, when I have my clinics at my branch office, the biggest approach is for financial assistance, then for a job, and then for housing. And I've canvassed the rest of my colleagues, and across the constituencies it's the same. Over the last 10 years, what we've now called the lost decade, because that is what it was. Barbados lost its way. The government lost its way. The NHC lost its way. The public service lost its way. The transport board lost its way. The BWA lost its way. And that last decade was characterized by the non-functioning of statutory corporations, the collapse of many of the social services, and the failure to make any dent whatsoever into providing housing solutions to people who are most in need. In Christchurch East, there has not been one new government house built, NHC development, for I do not know how long. I do not know how long. So I'm excited at the fact that this development is coming, this proposed development is coming to Chancery Lane. Now here comes the caution, sir. When I was in the other place, we did a number of resolutions to vest property in the National Housing Corporation for this, or to vest property in the National Housing Corporation for that. I am not aware of many, if any, coming on stream. So I do not want this to be a case where the NHC receives the land supposedly for housing development and then nothing happens. I know the plot that they're talking about. This plot is on its way to Long Beach. Long Beach is the most beautiful beach in Barbados. It is. It is underutilized. Sir, I'm not hearing the sides, but I think my qualification of, I can say this without a doubt. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Long Beach is one of the most, if not the most beautiful beach in Barbados. It is secluded. The environs of Long Beach are, I would say, underdeveloped. There's lots of land out there. There is a pristine wetland that in the rainy season we get migratory birds. It is beautiful. It makes you think walking through that area that you're somewhere else entirely. You forget that there are houses maybe half a mile away. You forget that the airport is up the hill. You forget that Oistins is down the road. You think you're in some sort of paradise created by God for the benefit of the people who live in Christchurch East and for those who live in the rest of Barbados to visit. So the fact that this development, or this proposed development, or the area zone for development is close to Long Beach, just under the hill from Ferry Valley, abutting and bounding Chancery Lane, is exciting, because we are not looking to do another housing development in a landlocked area, in an urban community where there are no real amenities. Anybody, a tourist, would love to stay in that area. A Barbadian would love to have the opportunity to purchase some of that land and put a house there. A middle-class person, somebody wanting a recreation facility near the beach. So the fact that we are vesting this land on the edge of Long Beach in the National Housing Corporation for housing development says we are going in the right direction. We need to change the concept of what we envision when we envision national housing developments. We need to put aside the concrete jungle. We need to put aside houses or units stacked on top of each other where the aim is to cram as many units in as possible without providing amenities or making the place acceptable, somewhere that people really, really want to come home and are excited to come home to live. The fact that we are providing or seeking to provide low-income housing does not necessarily mean we should provide poor services or poor housing. Any housing that the National Housing Corporation constructs from now, and in particular any development that they attempt to undertake in Christchurch East, I beg the Minister of Housing, who I know to be a man who listens and is progressive and forward-thinking, I beg him that the housing developments should be as modern as they can be, as the price allows. They should incorporate the newest technology in relation to septic tanks and sewering. When the development is done, it should have underground utilities, no overhead wires to make it climate resilient. When the houses are constructed, consideration must be given to solar or some other form of alternative energy that can power the development and reduce the operational costs to the government or to the unit owners. Mr. Speaker, when we talk about a condo, when somebody says, I have a condo, you automatically think upscale, middle to higher middle to upper income level. When somebody says, I live in a condo, a condominium development, you think swimming pool and tennis courts. You think facilities. But effectively, if we actually look at what a condominium development is, a condominium development is a development where properties are constructed, the utilities and common areas are shared, the persons purchase from the developer who retains some control over the maintenance, and everybody pays a portion to it. But effectively, that should be the model for the National Housing Corporation. Without knowing it, the National Housing Corporation developments are effectively condominium developments. But it's just that the residents don't actually pay towards the shared services. If we take a step and we start to build for low-income housing what we can see ourselves living in, something we'd want for ourselves and our children, you then get people coming in with a different mindset. If I come into a housing development and there's a basketball court or a road tennis court or a nice green area and a play park with proper equipment and it is upkept, then the people who live in that development will have a sense of pride attached to where they live, in the same way so that you have a sense of pride attached to where they live. Somebody who brings home their child and their child wants to come home and rush home to play in the play park in front of their house, or to use the swings, or to go on the basketball court, that person is not going to throw garbage in the same area. So simply by us revolutionizing the way we approach low-income housing and the concept of low-income housing, we can provide better, more habitable, more welcoming accommodation that encourages Barbadians, low-income Barbadians, to be house proud and community proud. If we want to stamp out violence, in communities, then we have to start to make people once again proud of their communities and want to go home to their communities. If we want to have no littering and have tidy and pretty communities, then we have to make people proud of where they live and encourage them to treat it in the way so that you treat your property. Sir, I embrace the Barbados vision, the Barbadian vision of carbon neutral Barbados by 2030. I embrace the Barbados Labour Party commitment to being carbon neutral by 2030. I just came out of a meeting with the Honourable Prime Minister where we're looking at electric buses. We all know that the government is on the hunt for electric garbage trucks. We know we are moving towards a policy of electric vehicles only, procurement of electric vehicles only going forward for the ministries and the statutory corporations. Barbados, as it stands now, has 390 electric vehicles. We are per capita with electric vehicles in the top 3 in the world. We have committed as a government, and we are seeking funding and grant funding and project funding as a government based on the fact that we want to become the first carbon neutral Caribbean territory, the first carbon neutral small island developing state by 2030. So everything we do from here has to incorporate that. So when Minister Duguid when the Honourable Member for Christchurch West talks about the Transport Board and needing to get buses, he should necessarily be thinking electric buses, even if he doesn't say, or buses powered by some form of alternative energy. When Minister Humphrey, the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South, talks about the blue economy and redeveloping our fishing fleet, he should be talking about solar-powered fishing boats. When the Minister of Tourism, the Honourable Member for St. James Central, talks about tourism and redeveloping the airport and expansion of the airport, the top of the airport, all of that roof space should be lined off with electric panels, and thus reducing the electricity bill for the government of Barbados. The government of Barbados spends the greatest drain on the foreign exchange of Barbados is in fuel costs. So it is not just simply that we have to look to using alternative energy. It is that we need to transition our mind from the old way of doing things. It is not just about generating renewable energy. It's about using less energy. It is not just about water-efficient toilets and waterborne systems. It's about using less water. So if we start to embrace this vision, and we are committed and we believe it can happen, it needs to happen in every single aspect. Right now we're discussing vesting of land in the National Housing Corporation. So I am urging the Honourable Member for St. Andrew, did I pronounce that right? The Honourable Member for Andrew? I heard it as Andrew. The Honourable Member for St. Andrew, that every single national housing development from here should, as a matter of requirement, whoever is designing it or bidding to build it, one of the design criteria must be energy efficiency. It must be energy efficiency. I would feel great, Mr. Speaker, to see a small windmill on top of a National Housing Corporation building. I would feel great to look from above and not see any galvanized, because all the galvanizable area is covered in solar panels. I would love to see on the side of the buildings those Tesla battery packs for storing the energy during the day and releasing the energy at night. I would love to see, when the tender goes out, that the honourable member for St. Andrew insists that every single unit must have energy efficient toilets and shut off taps in the bathrooms. How many of us turn on our taps, Mr. Speaker, to brush our teeth, and we leave the tap running the whole time we brush our teeth? How many of us go in the shower, for those of us who have water? How many of us go in the shower and we turn on the shower and we get wet and we start the soap? We don't turn off the water. We step away from the water, soap, leaving the water running, and then step back under the water. We have become a wasteful society. The cost of water in Barbados is cheap. It is cheap, Mr. Speaker, so we waste it. When we had the fixed water bills, where I can't remember what the bill used to be, but it used to be a fixed amount for every household per month. When people had leaks, they didn't try to fix them. You had a tap in your yard that is locked off, the pipe broke off and is running. You didn't try to fix it because it didn't affect your water bill. A lot of us complain about our electricity bill, but how many of us turn off the lights when we leave the room? How many of us have the systems where the lights outside your house can shut off when the sun comes up? It is all of these things that we need to be thinking about to carry Barbados through to see our vision of a carbon neutral Barbados by 2030. And it has to start with the NHC. I am hoping, I have heard the Honourable Member for St. Andrews saying how disgusted he was with what went on in the last administration. I have heard him saying that Barbados needs new housing stock. We have heard the cries of all the members in here who have suffered in their constituencies, or who have had people suffer because houses burned down. A lot of house fires over the last couple of weeks, and there's nowhere to put them because the NHC has no housing stock. The NHC has not fulfilled its mandate to the government and the people of Barbados over the last 10 years. The Honourable Member for St. Andrew has said over and over, he plans to take the NHC and turn it around. The NHC needs to start functioning in the way it was intended, or heads going roll. That is his quote. I know him, Mr. Speaker, as a man who does what he says. So I am asking him to hear me now and my plea for the people of Christchurch East. Let not this land acquisition or the vesting of this land in the NHC be simply a paper transaction. Let it be the paper transaction that is leading swiftly to tenders and designs and construction. And I'm asking this as well. We need to look, there needs to be some transparency in how the NHC awards houses to people. I know the NHC is overburdened by applications for housing. And I know as a fact that the distribution of housing has not always been equitable and has been nothing in the last 10 years closely related to transparent. But if I may make this humble suggestion, if you construct housing in Christchurch, let the people who come from Christchurch have first call on that housing. If you construct housing in St. Thomas or St. Peter or St. Andrew, let the people from St. Thomas or St. Peter or St. Andrew have the first call. Because what happens, sir? What happens? If we look at it, people grow up in an area. When you move away from that area and you go and live somewhere else, you're supposed to change your voter registration. But I left Christchurch years ago and I moved to St. Michael. But my family is in Christchurch. So I continue every election to trek back down to Christchurch to vote because that is where I came from. that's where the most of my roots are. And that happens across the length and breadth of Barbados. Most people who come up in a house, you come up in the same housing unit, and they may initially have been mommy and daddy. There's no mommy and daddy and 4. And 2 of those 4 may have children. So it's mommy and daddy and 4 plus 4. So you may have 10 people in a unit. Those who are eligible want to find housing for themselves and allow a start for their family. And they want the option of a starter home from the NHC. Some of them want to rent it, some of them want to buy it. But invariably, they don't want to leave where they came from and go somewhere else. So,
5 more minutes, please.
Already, sir? So, the point, sir, is rather we need to look at the way we construct the developments and start to put developments into all of the constituencies. There's not one constituency in Barbados that cannot benefit from better housing. There is not one constituency in Barbados that is not crying out for housing that is affordable to low-income earners. I'm not saying cheap housing. I'm saying this is where the government flexes its muscle and uses the concept of bulk purchase. If I'm giving you as a contractor not one house to build, but 30 or 40 or 50 units, then your price per unit has to come down. So the quality need not come down, but the price must come down. The people who purchase national housing units should be entitled to have proper finishes in their house, proper amenities in their development, proper renewable energy considerations, proper sewage solutions. It is for the Minister for St. Andrew and those who work in the national housing to figure out how to get it done. But we need to get to the point where low-income housing is not seen as desperation, but is seen as what it is supposed to be. It is seen as the government providing a start or an advantage for people who otherwise could not afford it, but who deserve it and who intend to be house owners. The other thing as well, sir, the National Housing Corporation, under the new government, under our new way of thinking, we need to ensure that we're not taken for a ride by unscrupulous contractors. It cannot be the case that national housing units are constructed at the same cost per square foot as houses on the West Coast. It cannot happen anymore. We need to do what is right by the people of Barbados. As I said, I am excited at the fact that this acquisition is in Christchurch East. I'm excited at the possibility that people from Ferry Valley, people from Sayers Court, people from Parish Lands, Civil Sands might be able to benefit from this same housing development. I will be even more excited when the electric buses come on stream and we get proper bus service to the same Ferry Valley and the same Chancery Lane. I live in hope, Mr. Speaker, but I can say that this is a good start. There's many a slip between cup and lip, but I hope that this paper transaction finds its way into a manifested housing development that can serve the people of Barbados and the people of Christchurch East. I thank you.
Thank you. Member for St. Andrew. Somebody got 4 spoons. Somebody has the 4 spoons. 4 spoons.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution, consideration of it be postponed.
That's all. Signed by seconded.
Yeah.
Question is that this bill be postponed, resolution be postponed for further consideration. Seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. We think the ayes have it.
Next thing. Mr. Deputy Speaker, when this matter was first mentioned, we didn't mention the NAS one specifically. We have received written instructions that the information that was actually included in the Senate bill was correct, and therefore the Chamber is asked to disagree and to send the matter back to the Senate for their only in respect of this particular clause, sir.
And that we agree with the other two?
We're not changing the other two, only in respect of the NAS.
Seconded?
Seconded by John.
This by
change back.
Pedro, I'll put the question on.
Put the question that we amend the resolution to pass. That we amended the resolution to agree with the amendments made to the debt restructuring and the road traffic, but disagree with the one made to the NAS. We agree to the amendments made to the debt restructuring and the road traffic, but disagree with those made to the NAS.
No, we done, man. We're talking this evening straight up.
And the debt restructuring, but disagree with the amendments made to the
The question is that we agree to the amendment of the debt restructuring and the road traffic, but we are disagreeing with those made to the INS amendment. All those in favor say aye. Those against say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker,
Deputy Speaker,
this brings us to the end of government business for the day. I beg to move that this House be now adjourned until Tuesday, the 6th of November, 2018 at 10 o'clock.
I second that, please. Question is that this House be adjourned until Tuesday, the 6th of November at 10 o'clock in the morning. All those members in favor say aye. Those against say no. We think the ayes have it. This House is now adjourned until Tuesday, the 6th of November at 10 o'clock in the morning.
It's 3 o'clock, man. We just supposed to be here all this time.
Because the people are waiting for quite short.
Too much people talk all morning.
Yes. And they put them up, should I have the police force? You say